The silent confession had already sealed its fate. The pristine white of the bridal gown was already stained, not by mud or spilled wine, but by a truth so bitter, so ugly, it was a poison slowly seeping into the very foundations of the magnificent manor. It wasn't a moment of fleeting doubt or pre-wedding jitters. This was a deliberate, cold-blooded admission whispered between the bride and her maid of honor, a secret that had been carried for years like a hidden wound,
Hey, by the
now
way, I
finally
forgot to
bursting
mention that there's a
open
lot of action
minutes
in the city
before the
tonight.
grand
I've
ceremony.
uploaded the
The
race
truth
locations
was,
to your map.
a shard
Go
of
out there
glass,
and start
and
making
it
the
had
place
just been
hum.
driven straight into the heart of the one person who had no right to hear it, the humble maid, Anya. Her knuckles were white on the silver tray she held, the delicate flutes of champagne trembling with the force of her shock. The soft strains of the string quartet filtered through the half-open door, a
Hey
cruel,
man, if you haven't already
harmonious
heard, I'm in the
counterpoint
know when it comes
to
to
the
all the tier
discordant
reviews
chaos
coming and going in
erupting within
Bayview.
her.
If a
She
shop's got
wanted to
something prime
scream,
and worth
to
looking at,
drop the
I'll get
tray,
you on your
and let the
SMS
crystal
right back on
shatter
it. But
into a
stuff usually
million
goes
pieces,
fast, so
a
pay attention
reflection
to
of
the
her
message
own
alert.
broken
Don't
world.
thank me just
But
yet.
she
I
couldn't.
haven't figured out
She
what you
had
owe
to
me in
remain
return.
still,
Call
a
you later.
ghost in the grand hallway, invisible and unheard, a silent witness to a betrayal so profound it transcended the personal. It was a lie that had been built on another lie, a house of cards constructed over a grave. She closed her eyes for a fleeting second, the image of a smiling, unsuspecting groom burning behind her eyelids. He deserved better. They all deserved the truth. Please, take a moment to subscribe to our channel. It's a simple click that means the world to us. And with over 90% of our viewers not yet subscribed, every single one makes a difference. Her story was not a tale of a jilted lover or a vengeful ex, but of a quiet life that had been systematically dismantled, piece by piece, under the guise of an unbreakable bond. Years ago, Anya had shared a life with a man she had loved with every fiber of her being. They were not wealthy, their world was simple, built on shared dreams, laughter, and the promise of a future forged together. His name was Julian. He was an artist, a sculptor whose hands could breathe life into clay and stone, creating figures that seemed to hold a soul of their own. They had been inseparable, their love a quiet, steady flame against the winds of a harsh world. But that flame had been extinguished, not by time or circumstance, but by a cunning, venomous deceit. It had started subtly, a new friend entering their circle, a woman with a dazzling smile and an even more dazzling socialite charm. She had seemed a beacon of light, a force of nature, and had quickly become their confidant, their trusted friend. This woman was Evelyn. Evelyn,
Yo,
the
listen
bride,
here. You're
now
about to get
preparing to
fully
walk
fucked
down
with a
the
street
aisle,
cross.
her
This
face
is
a
hot.
mask of
Can't
serene
sweat.
perfection, her smile the same one that had once disarmed Anya and Julian, the very same one that had, years later, become a weapon. She had poisoned Julian's mind with lies, whispering half-truths and fabrications about Anya's supposed infidelity, using her wealth and social standing to manipulate and isolate him. The wedge she had driven between them was thin at first, almost imperceptible, but it had grown until it became a chasm, wide and deep. Julian, heartbroken and confused, had left, his final words a mix of pain and accusation. Anya had been left with nothing but the shattered pieces of her life, a raw, gaping wound that had never truly healed. She had found a new life, a new path, cleaning houses in the grandest parts of the city, her pride a fragile shield against the world. She had never expected to find herself back in this world, let alone at the heart of the wedding of the woman who had stolen everything from her. And now, the truth, so long buried, had been revealed. Evelyn, with a voice full of a cruel, almost triumphant glee, had just confessed to her maid of honor that she had never truly loved the groom, a wealthy, kind-hearted man named Alexander. She had only married him for his family's name, his fortune, and the power that came with it. The marriage was a
Hey, nice
business
radio back
transaction,
there, but here's
a strategic
a little
alliance,
tip for
a
you.
cold,
I don't know how this works,
calculated move.
to
But
have
the real
tabs
dagger
indicating
to Anya's heart was the next
we're
part of the
just winning
confession
here, ain't it?
that her affair
Well,
with
you
Julian
build your
had not only been a lie, but a
reputation by
deliberate
destroying
plan
your
to break
opponents.
them up.
Marginal
Evelyn had
victory is
revealed
important
that
to
she
you.
had always envied Anya's simple, genuine love with Julian and couldn't stand to see a happiness she could never have. So she took it, and Julian, broken by Evelyn's lies, had retreated from the world, his art and his heart. Anya had heard it all, the brutal honesty of a woman without a conscience, a woman who saw people as pawns in her grand scheme, the anger that had been simmering within Anya for years, a quiet, mournful ember, was now fanned into a raging inferno. The pain was still there, but it was now laced with a burning, righteous fury. The tray, the glasses, the very air around her felt charged with a new, dangerous energy. It was no longer about her lost love or her shattered past. It was about justice. It was about protecting a good man, Alexander, from marrying a snake in a lace gown. The wedding music, once a soft melody, now felt like a battle cry. She was no longer a silent maid. She was a woman on a mission. The truth had been a poison, but now it was her weapon. The venomous words of the bride, echoing from the half-open door, had not only confirmed Anya's darkest suspicions, but had also ignited a fire of resolve within her. Her hands, which moments ago trembled with shock, now held the silver tray with a newfound, unwavering grip. The polished surface reflected her face, pale and taut, with a mixture of pain and determination. The delicate flutes of champagne, once symbols of celebration, now felt like tools of her impending revenge. She had to act, and she had to act now. Every second counted. The guests were starting to fill the grand hall, their chatter and laughter a stark contrast to the silent storm brewing in Anya's heart. The groom, Alexander, was standing at the altar, a beacon of unsuspecting happiness, his eyes scanning the crowd with a gentle, loving anticipation. Anya's heart ached for him. He was a good man, a man who deserved genuine love, not this elaborate charade. She knew she could not stand by and watch this deception unfold to let another good person fall victim to Evelyn's twisted games. The risk was enormous. She could lose her job, be humiliated, even face legal trouble. But the alternative, to remain a silent accomplice to this monstrous lie, was simply unthinkable. Her years of silent suffering and a lifetime of injustice culminated in this one fateful moment. Please, take a moment to subscribe to our channel. It's the best way to support us and make sure you never miss a story. Remember, over 90% of our viewers aren't subscribed, so every single one makes a big difference. Anya began to move, her steps no longer a quiet, unassuming glide, but a purposeful, deliberate march. She wove through the throng of elegantly dressed guests, her presence still largely unnoticed. To them, she was just the maid, a fleeting shadow in their opulent world. But within that shadow, a plan was rapidly taking shape. She knew she couldn't simply storm the altar and scream the truth. It would be dismissed as the ravings of a crazy person, a disgruntled employee. She needed proof. She needed something irrefutable, something that would not only expose Evelyn, but also save Alexander from a lifetime of misery. Her mind raced, sifting through the years of pain, fragments of memories, and the cruel words she had just overheard. The answer was not in some grand, dramatic gesture, but in the small, intimate details of the day. The wedding was a meticulously planned spectacle, and in that perfection lay its greatest vulnerability. There were cameras, microphones, and a live stream for those who couldn't attend. Evelyn, in her hubris, had been so focused on the grand illusion that she had likely forgotten to cover her tracks completely. Anya's gaze fell upon the large projection screen at the side of the hall, which was currently displaying a slideshow of the happy couple. An idea, dangerous and brilliant, took hold. She knew where the control room was. She had been there just yesterday, cleaning, and had seen the technician's setup. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but it was the only shot she had. The path to the control room was a maze of bustling staff, last-minute decorations, and oblivious guests. Anya moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who had long been accustomed to being invisible. She reached the door, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She slipped inside, the hum of electronics and the faint voices from the live feed creating a world separate from the jubilant one outside. The technician was engrossed in his work, adjusting levels and ensuring the feed was flawless. She had to be quick. She couldn't use force. She wasn't built for a confrontation. She had to be clever. Anya's eyes scanned the console, her mind working furiously. She saw the main control panel, the one that managed the audio feed for the entire hall. She also saw the backup audio recorder, a small, unassuming device that captured every word spoken into the official microphones. The plan was simple, audacious, and fraught with peril. She had to swap the audio feeds. She needed to bypass the live feed's audio with the recording of Evelyn's confession. But the technician was right there. A sudden, unexpected opportunity arose. When the technician's phone rang, he mumbled an apology and stepped out of the room to take the call, leaving the console unguarded for a mere few moments. This was it. Anya's hands flew over the panel, her movements a blur of practiced efficiency. She located the audio input, found the recorder, and, with a few precise keystrokes, redirected the main audio output. She bypassed the live microphone feed and substituted it with the recorded soundbite of Evelyn's confession. It was an act of rebellion, executed with the grace of a professional. The technician walked back in, oblivious to the seismic shift that had just occurred. He smiled at Anya, who was now calmly holding her tray, her face a mask of serene composure. She had done it. The fuse was lit. As she made her way back to the main hall, a silent prayer escaped her lips, not for a higher power, but for the truth itself. The string quartet began to play the iconic wedding march. Evelyn, on the arm of her proud father, started her grand entrance. The music swelled, filling the room with a sense of grandeur and anticipation. The guests turned, their faces alight with smiles and camera flashes. Anya, standing at the edge of the hall, watched, her heart in her throat. Alexander's face, a picture of pure, unadulterated happiness, was now trained on his bride. And then it happened. The music abruptly stopped. A screech of feedback cut through the air, followed by a hushed, confused silence. The crowd murmured, looking for the source of the technical glitch. But it wasn't a glitch. It was the moment of truth. The speakers, previously broadcasting the romantic melody, now began to play a muffled, yet crystal clear recording. Evelyn's voice, a serpent's hiss, filled the hall, her confession of lies and betrayal echoing for all to hear. The words were unmistakable, raw, and devastating. The crowd gasped, their heads swiveling from the source of the sound to the bride, who stood frozen, her face contorted in a mask of shock and horror. Her grand illusion had just crumbled before their very eyes. The wedding was over, and the revenge had just begun. The silence that followed the voice of Evelyn was a living, breathing thing, heavier than the grand chandeliers that hung from the ceiling. The guests stood frozen, their mouths agape, their cameras now lowered, forgotten in their hands. The projector screen, which had moments before shown images of a loving couple, now felt like a cruel mockery. Evelyn's face was a masterpiece of horror, a grotesque mix of shock, rage, and profound mortification. Her father, his face ashen, stepped back as if from a stranger. Alexander, the groom, stood at the altar, his broad shoulders slumped, his eyes fixed on the empty space where his future had just vanished. His expression was not one of rage, but of a quiet, devastating heartbreak. The betrayal was not just in Evelyn's confession, but in the years of lies she had woven around him. The moment hung in the air, a tableau of shattered dreams and exposed lies. Anya, from her place at the back of the hall, watched it all unfold with a quiet, steely resolve. The storm in her heart had finally broken, and what remained was a cold, clear calm. She had done what she came to do. She had brought the truth to light. But as she watched Alexander's face, a new feeling began to stir within her, not of triumph, but of empathy. He was a victim in this, just as much as she had been, a pawn in a game he didn't even know he was playing. Please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. It's the best way to support us, and make sure you never miss a story. Remember, over 90% of our viewers aren't subscribed, so every single one makes a big difference. Anya knew that exposing Evelyn was not enough. Alexander needed more than just the truth. He needed to understand the depth of the deception. The story of his broken engagement was already a public spectacle, but the full scope of Evelyn's treachery and her connection to Julian remained a private pain. Anya knew she had to take a leap of faith. She had to step out of the shadows and reveal her own connection to this sordid tale. As the crowd began to stir, their whispers growing louder, Evelyn finally found her voice. It was a shriek, a raw and animalistic sound of pure fury. She turned towards the back of the hall, her eyes scanning the crowd, looking for the culprit. Her gaze landed on Anya, who stood still and proud, holding her silver tray. Recognition, then hatred, flashed across Evelyn's face. You did this!" she screamed, her voice cutting through the hall. "You're a nothing, a maid. How dare you?" The insult was meant to sting, to diminish Anya, but it had the opposite effect. It was an acknowledgement, a validation of Anya's power in that moment. Alexander, hearing the commotion, looked towards them, his eyes full of confusion. He had no idea who this maid was, or what her connection to the drama was. Anya, with a new sense of purpose, put the tray down on a nearby table. She walked forward, her head held high, her gaze steady. Every step felt like a victory. She stopped a few feet from Alexander, and her voice, though not as loud as Evelyn's, carried a weight that commanded attention. "She's right, Alexander," Anya began, her voice calm and clear. "I am a maid, but I am also the woman she destroyed to get what she wanted. I am Julian's Anya." The name hung in the air like a ghost. Alexander's face, already pale, lost even more color. He knew the name. He had heard whispers of a broken man, a tragic artist, whose life had fallen apart after a love affair. He had assumed it was all a rumor, a bit of gossip from Evelyn's past. But now, seeing the pain and sincerity in Anya's eyes, he knew it was all true. Evelyn, seeing her past and present colliding, lunged at Anya, but was held back by her horrified father and a few family members. The scene was no longer a wedding, but a full-blown tragedy. The guests, initially shocked, were now captivated by the raw emotion unfolding before them. It was a drama more compelling than any television show. Anya continued, her words a final, damning blow. "She didn't just lie to you, Alexander. She lied to everyone. She manipulated, she schemed, and she destroyed a life because she was jealous of a love she could never have. She didn't want me to have Julian's love, so she stole him. And when he didn't work out, she came after your wealth. Don't be fooled." Her confession wasn't out of remorse. It was out of a twisted sense of accomplishment, a private victory that she had to share with her partner in crime. The crowd murmured, their whispers now tinged with disgust. Alexander stood immobile, his gaze fixed on Anya, processing this new, devastating information. He finally understood. This was not a betrayal that happened just moments ago. It was a betrayal that had been years in the making. a foundation built on sand and lies. Anya, having said all she needed to say, turned to walk away. She had done her part. The truth was out, but a hand on her arm stopped her. It was Alexander. His eyes were no longer filled with sorrow, but with a dawning realization and a flicker of something she couldn't quite name. He looked at her, at the quiet, brave woman who had just risked everything to save him. The anger and pain were still there, but they were now mixed with a deep respect and a profound sense of gratitude. The touch of Alexander's hand was a surprise, a gentle anchor in the midst of the swirling chaos. The grand hall, once a monument to a false love, was now a stage for raw human trauma. Evelyn had been ushered out, her furious protests fading into the distance. The guests, now a collection of spectators, watched as the drama between the groom and the maid unfolded. Alexander's grip was firm, but not restraining. He looked at Anya, and for the first time, he truly saw her. Not as a maid, not as a background character, but as a person, a woman who had endured unimaginable pain and still had the courage to stand up for the truth. He saw the strength in her eyes, the quiet dignity in her posture. He saw the scars of a past he had never known. The questions came tumbling out, a torrent of desperate curiosity. Julian, where is he? Is he okay? What happened to him? Alexander's voice was low, filled with a genuine concern that surprised Anya. It was clear that he wasn't just a rich man, he was a man with a heart. Please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. It's the best way to support us and make sure you never miss a story. Remember, over 90% of our viewers aren't subscribed, so every single one makes a big difference. Anya hesitated for a moment. Julian's fate was a private grief, a wound that had never fully healed. But she knew that for Alexander to truly understand, he needed to hear the rest of the story. She spoke softly, her voice filled with a mournful affection. She told him about Julian's art, about his spirit, about the quiet, simple happiness they had shared. She told him about how Evelyn had systematically poisoned Julian's mind with lies, fabricating stories of infidelity, and how Julian, shattered and confused, had left not only her, but also his art. He lost his passion, Anya said, her voice catching. He lost his art, and he lost himself. He was a brilliant sculptor, but he never sculpted again after that. The lies broke him, and he just vanished. The words hung in the air, heavy with a shared sadness. Alexander listened, his face a study of emotions. The initial heartbreak was now laced with a deep, personal empathy. He saw his own life, reflected in Julian's. He had almost fallen into a similar trap, almost married a woman who had no real love for him, a woman who had no qualms about destroying lives for her own gain. He looked at Anya, and a new wave of respect washed over him. She had not only saved him from a terrible marriage, but she had also exposed a truth that had been haunting him for years without his knowledge. The remaining guests, sensing the intimacy of the moment, slowly began to disperse, their whispers replaced by the soft rustle of expensive fabrics. The grand hall, once bustling with life, was now quiet, save for the two of them. Alexander took Anya's hand, his touch surprisingly gentle. He guided her to a quiet corner, away from the prying eyes of the few lingering staff members. He didn't try to minimize her pain or make it about himself. He listened, truly listened, as she spoke about the years of silent struggle, the pride that had kept her going, and the quiet hope that one day she would find peace. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the polished floor, the two of them sat, two strangers brought together by a shared betrayal. They talked for hours, not just about Evelyn and Julian, but about their lives, their dreams, their fears. Alexander spoke of his own loneliness, of the pressure to marry for status, and the genuine hope he had had that Evelyn was different. He confessed that he had felt something was off, a subtle coldness, a lack of genuine connection, but he had dismissed it, wanting to believe in the fairy tale. And as they talked, a strange and wonderful thing happened. The shared pain began to fade, replaced by a deep and genuine connection. They found common ground in their shared experience, a bond forged in the fires of deception. He saw her as a person of immense character, and she saw him as a man of true kindness, not just a symbol of wealth. As the moonlight filtered through the tall windows, Alexander finally spoke. "Anya," he said, his voice soft and earnest, "you risked everything to save me. I can't thank you enough, but I also want to ask you something." He hesitated, his eyes searching hers for a sign. "Will you let me try to help you? To help Julian? I have resources. I can hire people to find him, to get him the help he needs. I can give him a chance to get his art back, and I want to get to know you better. I know this is crazy, but you're the most honest person I've ever met, and I think I want to know what a real connection feels like." Anya was stunned into silence. It was not a grand romantic gesture, but a simple, heartfelt plea for connection and a chance to make things right. It was an offer of partnership, of healing, and of hope. It was a lifeline she had never expected to be thrown. She looked at him, at his sincere eyes and his kind smile, and she knew this wasn't a trick. It was a genuine offer from a good man who had been through his own hell. The revenge had not brought her a bitter satisfaction. It had brought her a new beginning, a chance for redemption, and the first ray of real hope she had felt in years. She took a deep breath, and a small, genuine smile touched her lips. "Yes, Alexander," she said. "Yes, I will." The broken engagement, initially a source of immense public embarrassment, became a catalyst for a new, authentic life. He took a break from his business ventures, dedicating himself to finding Julian. The search was a difficult one. Julian had vanished without a trace, a ghost in his own life, a man who had intentionally erased himself from the world. Anya, now working at Alexander's family foundation, found herself with a sense of purpose she had never known. She was no longer just a maid. She was a valued member of a team dedicated to supporting artists, particularly those who had lost their way. She used her own story, her pain, and her resilience to connect with others, to offer them a hand up when they felt at their lowest. Her work was a balm for her own soul, a way of turning her suffering into something beautiful and meaningful. She and Alexander spent hours together, sharing stories of their day, their bond deepening with every shared laugh and every quiet moment of understanding. Their connection was not a whirlwind romance. It was a slow, steady burn, a quiet and comforting certainty. It was built on a foundation of respect, empathy, and a shared history of betrayal. They were two halves of a story, each one broken in a different way, now finding a way to mend each other. Please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. It's a simple click that means the world to us. And with over 90% of our viewers not yet subscribed, every single one makes a difference. The breakthrough in the search for Julian came from an unexpected source, a small, obscure art gallery in a remote, forgotten town. Alexander's private investigator had found a record of a recent sale of a small sculpture, a piece that bore the unmistakable marks of Julian's style. The artist's name was listed simply as J. It was a lead, a fragile thread, but it was enough. Alexander and Anya, filled with a mix of trepidation and hope, decided to go themselves. The town was a world away from the manicured lawns and opulent halls of the city. It was a place of quiet streets, old brick buildings, and a sense of timeless peace. They found the gallery, a small, unassuming space filled with local art. And there, in the back, behind a velvet curtain, was the sculpture. It was a single, solitary figure of a man, his head bowed, his hands outstretched, as if in supplication. It was raw, emotional, and filled with a quiet despair that spoke volumes. The gallery owner, a kind, elderly woman with a warm smile, confirmed that the artist was a man who lived a solitary life in a small cottage on the outskirts of town. He came in once a month, she said, to drop off a new piece, but he never stayed, never talked about his art, and seemed to want to remain invisible. The description was a perfect match for the man Anya had loved. The reality of finding him was overwhelming. Anya felt a wave of emotions crash over her: relief, fear, and a deep, consuming sadness. She wanted to run to him, to hold him and tell him everything, but she knew she couldn't. This was not about her. This was about him, about giving him back a piece of the life that had been stolen. They found the cottage, a small wooden structure nestled in a clearing, surrounded by trees. A faint light shone from the window. Anya's heart was a drum in her chest. Alexander, ever the gentleman, understood her turmoil. "You should go alone," he said quietly. "This is your story to tell. I'll wait here." Anya nodded, her eyes filled with gratitude. She walked to the door and knocked, her hand trembling. The door opened slowly, and there he was, Julian. He was older, his face lined with a decade of sorrow, but it was him. His eyes, once so bright and full of life, were now shadowed, his gaze wary and guarded. He looked at Anya, and for a long moment, there was nothing but silence. The years melted away, the pain and the betrayal rushing back in a dizzying torrent. Then, a flicker of recognition, a flash of pure disbelief, and a single tear traced a path down his weathered cheek. "Anya," he whispered, his voice a ghost of its former self. The name, spoken from his lips, was the only thing that mattered in the world. It was a bridge across a chasm of 10 years, a word that held a lifetime of memory, pain, and longing. Anya stepped inside, the door closing behind her, sealing them in a world of their own. Julian's cottage was an artist's sanctuary, but it was also a tomb. The air was filled with the scent of clay and sawdust, but also a profound, melancholic quiet. His sculptures, though fewer in number, were scattered around the room, each a silent testament to a heart that had been broken and a soul that had been silenced. He had not sculpted a human figure in a decade. His art, once so vibrant and full of emotion, was now cold, abstract, and filled with a hollow emptiness. Anya's heart broke for him all over again. She saw the full extent of the damage Evelyn had caused, not just to their relationship, but to his very essence as an artist and a man. She looked at him, and all the anger she had once held against him for believing the lies was gone, replaced by a wave of pure, overwhelming compassion. He was a victim, just like her, just like Alexander. Please, take a moment to subscribe to our channel. It's a simple click that means the world to us. And with over 90% of our viewers not yet subscribed, every single one makes a difference. She sat him down, and with a voice filled with a quiet strength, she told him everything. She didn't hold back. She told him about Evelyn's deceit, her calculated lies, and her cold, ruthless ambition. She told him about the wedding, about the overheard confession, and about the vengeance she had exacted. She didn't paint herself as a hero. She just told the truth, a story of a woman who had been pushed to her limit and had finally pushed back. She watched his face as she spoke, the initial shock giving way to disbelief, then a terrible, burning anger. The years of quiet resignation were finally giving way to a fury that had been buried deep within him. He stood up, his hands balled into fists, his face a storm of conflicting emotions. "All this time, she was lying? All this time I thought you had betrayed me." His voice was a raw, pained whisper. The pain was so palpable, it filled the room, a tangible weight between them. Anya reached out and gently took his hands, her touch a small anchor in his storm. "I know," she said softly. "I know. I thought you had left me because you stopped loving me. The truth is, we were both pawns in her game. But the game is over, Julian. She's gone. She can't hurt us anymore. It had set them all free, not from the pain, but from the lies. Julian, hearing about Alexander's role, was stunned. He saw the full circle of the narrative. A lie had brought them all together in a web of pain, and the truth had now connected them in a network of healing. He looked at Anya, at the strength in her eyes, at the woman who had lost everything but had not lost her heart. He saw the courage that had been buried beneath the quiet dignity of a maid, and he felt a new kind of love stirring within him, not for the woman he had lost, but for the woman she had become. The past was a wound, but it was no longer a secret. It was a shared truth, and in that truth, they found a path forward. He looked at her, his eyes filled with a new kind of light, and for the first time in 10 years, he felt a flicker of hope. He wasn't alone anymore. He was found. The journey back was a quiet one, filled with an unspoken understanding. Julian, though still shaken, was no longer a ghost. He was a man with a future. He and Anya spoke for hours, catching up on a decade of lost time, their conversation a mix of fond memories and the painful reality of what had been stolen from them. They did not try to rekindle a lost love. The wounds were too deep, the years too long. What they found instead was something more profound, a renewed, unbreakable friendship. They were allies, survivors of the same emotional war, and their bond was now a testament to their resilience. When they finally returned to the city, Alexander was waiting for them. The meeting between the two men was not what anyone would have expected. There was no rivalry, no animosity. There was a quiet handshake, a long, meaningful look, and a mutual understanding. They were both good men who had been used by a manipulative woman. They were both victims, and in that shared experience, they found a common ground, a respect that transcended their pasts. Alexander offered Julian a place to stay and a studio to work in. No strings attached. He did it not as a gesture of pity, but as a genuine act of kindness, a way of atoning for a betrayal he hadn't even committed. Please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. It's a simple click that means the world to us. And with over 90% of our viewers not yet subscribed, every single one makes a difference. Julian accepted the offer, not out of charity, but out of a dawning realization that he deserved a second chance. He began to sculpt again, not abstract figures of despair, but human forms, a testament to his own healing. The clay, once a dead weight in his hands, now felt alive, a conduit for a new, powerful kind of emotion. He was sculpting his own redemption, one piece at a time. The first piece he created was a figure of a woman, her head held high, a small, stubborn smile on her lips. It was Anya. It was a tribute to the woman who had saved them all. As for Anya and Alexander, their relationship deepened. The initial bond of shared tragedy had evolved into something beautiful and unique. They were a team, a partnership built on a foundation of trust and respect. They traveled together for the foundation, meeting with artists, listening to their stories, and giving them the resources they needed to rebuild their lives. They found a shared purpose in their work, a way of transforming their own pain into a source of hope for others. They were not two people trying to forget a painful past. They were two people using their past to build a better future. The climax arrived in a quiet moment, in the middle of a gallery opening for a new artist. A piece of art had been bought, a beautiful painting that spoke of resilience and hope. The buyer was Alexander. He had been quietly collecting art for a new wing of the foundation, a wing dedicated to the artists they had helped. As he stood next to Anya, he took her hand, his eyes filled with a tenderness that made her heart ache. "This," he said, his voice a low rumble, "is what a real masterpiece looks like. Not a painting, but a life. The life you've built, Anya. The one you helped me build. It was not a proposal, but it was so much more. It was a promise of a future, a partnership, a life of love and purpose. Anya looked at him, tears welling in her eyes, not of sadness, but of an overwhelming joy. The revenge she had sought had not brought her a bitter satisfaction. It had brought her a new life, a family in Julian and Alexander, and a love she had never thought possible. The final scene was set not in a grand hall, but in a small, intimate garden behind Alexander's house. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Julian had completed his masterpiece, the one he had been working on for months. It was a sculpture of a man and a woman, their hands intertwined, looking not at each other, but out at the horizon, a symbol of a shared future. It was a beautiful, hopeful piece, a testament to his own healing, and a quiet tribute to the two people who had helped him get there. Julian, now filled with a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a decade, announced that he was going to open a new art studio, one that would not just create art, but would also teach and mentor other artists. It was the final step in his redemption, a way of giving back to the world that had once seemed to have turned its back on him. He had found his purpose again, a life of meaning and passion. His old life was a closed book, and a new, more beautiful one had just begun. The final, unexpected twist came when Alexander and Anya, standing together, their hands intertwined, finally spoke of a future together. It wasn't in a loud, dramatic, public declaration. It was in a quiet moment, a simple conversation about a home they had been looking at, a garden they had dreamed of planting, and a future they both wanted to share. They were not a couple defined by their past, but by their shared vision of a future built on honesty, kindness, and a deep, genuine love. The revenge had not been about punishing Evelyn, but about freeing themselves. It was about taking back their lives, their hearts, and their futures. The revenge had been a cleansing fire, a necessary act that had burned away the lies and left them with a pure, beautiful truth. The final shot showed them, standing together, their faces bathed in the golden light of the setting sun, their hands clasped, their eyes full of a quiet, profound happiness. The maid had not only avenged herself, she had created a new, beautiful life, not with a prince, but with a kind man who had been saved by her courage, and a dear friend who had been found because of her heart. The story was not about a wedding, but about what happens after the wedding that never was. It was a story about the true meaning of love, forgiveness, and the power of a single person to change a life forever. It was a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope can be found, and that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings are born from the most unexpected endings. Nothing would ever be the same, and that was the most wonderful thing of all. The revenge had changed everything, and in doing so, had created a truly happy ending.